So hey guys, this is your favorite the fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awakens the power of Amaterasu goddess and becomes sun god? But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Birds flew in every direction, as the body of the nine tails fell onto the ground. The earth under the shinobi shook violently, knocking some off their feet. Trees were crushed underneath the weight of the kitsune, leaving a large imprint of it in the endless sea of trees surrounding Konoha. The shinobi were silent for a moment, looking at the dead form of the beast they had been fighting. Slowly, the shinobi rose, picking up their wounded and dead, walking back towards the village. There was no shouts of victory or celebrating. Not when they've lost so much. They had no reason to. If they had taken the time to notice, they would have seen a small child right next to the kitsune, wrapped up in a white sheet. Gamma Buddha looked at the child with sympathy, but had no energy left to take it back to the village. Instead, he did something else, something that may or may not help the child. Placing his hand on the ground, calling out for a messenger. A small black frog about the size of the child was now before him. Take a message to Amaterasu, tell her that we have a situation regarding Inari. The black toad saluted and disappeared in a puff of smoke, the frog boss sighing and looking at the child once more before disappearing in a puff of smoke. He would need to be kept safe, at all costs. An hour later, in a bright flash of light, a being appeared in the area that the battle took place. She was tall, standing at 6 feet 2 and having long black hair that came just below her knees. She was wearing a robe-like clothing, 2 large black wings sticking out from her back. If you want a good picture of her, go to my profile, I set one up near the bottom. The person looked around the area for something, before finally setting her sights on it, or him. The women walked towards the child gracefully, bending down to pick up the child when she reached him. The child had blonde hair and blue eyes, whisker marks visible on his checks. She looked down at the child, who was reaching up at her with his small hands. The women smiled at the child warmly, walking over to the kitsune's dead body and sitting on one of its paws. The women's hand reached for the white sheet that was wrapped around him. Lifting enough off of the child, she looked down at the seal on his stomach. The women still hadn't though of a way to save the child, even about to give up hope. This was until the boy's stomach started to glow. Looking down at the seal, she noticed that it was reforming into a more powerful one. This seal would be able to keep Tsuki under control, still at the cost of the child. The question is, what caused it to? Wait, it must have been the milk. This was around the tea. Me that something usually hits the stomach. How this could affect a seal that would keep a 10-story foot kitsune at bay, you ask? Anything from a goddess is powerful, no matter how you look at it. B. Wringing the cloth back up and reattaching it, the women covered the child with the sheet completely now that the issue with the seal was taken care of. Smiling down at the boy, she wondered what would happen now. Have you found him yet? The women heard someone ask to another, she looking in the direction of the voice. She listened in on the conversation. No, he wasn't around here either. Did he even survive it? One asked the other. I don't know, but we still need to find him. The women looked down at the child once more and smiled at him one final time, laying him back down in the grass. Disappearing in a flash of light. A few feathers falling down to the ground and around the child. A old man, in a white robe with the symbol for fire shadow on it rounded around the kitsune in tea. Ime to see the feathers fall around the child. The man walked up to him, picking the child up and cradling him in his arms. I found him. The man shouted out to the other people, a few men and women appearing behind him. All of them fully armored and ready for whatever may happen. You never know when an enemy could arrive. The old man looked down on the child and smiled. We've finally found him, Naruto. 12 years later, Naruto couldn't believe it. After all that time he spent training, all those nights reading through scrolls and practicing jutsu, he still failed. Ayame was going to be so disappointed in him. After he promised to become a shinobi. Sighing, he wondered what it would be like to go thought he academy a 4th time. He knew it was impossible, but if he was lucky, he could maybe convince the 3rd to give him another chance. Making his way towards his favorite ramen stand, Naruto thought of how to convince the third to let him try again. He didn't care how long it took. He was going to become a shinobi one way or another. A few minutes later, he arrived at the Ichiraku ramen stand. Naruto moved onto one of the stools and slumped a bit, asking for some ramen and putting his head down. Ayame, who had been taking care of the counter at the time, went over to Naruto with a slightly worried expression. I mean, if you've known someone to always be full of energy, ALW. AYS smiling no matter who or what was against them. Then something had to be up, period. Naruto-kun, what's wrong? Ayame asked, bending over the counter slightly to reach Naruto's height while sitting in the chair. Naruto tried his best to avoid eye contact with Ayame, the one thing that could always get him to tell her anything. Seriously, it was the whole make your life a living hell look, even worse. The don't you trust me enough look. Later one always got him, the former he. Had a slim chance of making it through. Looking a bit up at her, not at her face of course, staring at her chest, Naruto sighed. Nothing Ayame-chan, don't worry about it. Naruto replied, showing one of his widely known grins. One of the few things that anyone bothered to notice about Naruto, besides his hair and clothing, was his grin. Which Naruto thought could solve any problem. Oh, how the minds of children work and how we love to crush their little worlds. Is that just me? Ayame frowned, her glaze turning from worried to a saddened look. One that if Naruto saw, he would recognize instantly. Naruto cursed silently, taking into account that she skipped the first one and went straight to the second. Naruto took a glance at her, looking back down at the counter. Ayame tapped the counter a bit, seeing Naruto look over at her hand. But Naruto, Ayame said, dropping the kun suffix for a moment. I thought you were able to tell me anything, she stated, her second expression at full power. Naruto slightly looked up again, looking back down at the counter to try and avoid it. Ayame started to sniff a bit, looking down towards the counter as well. I only want to know what's wrong, Ayame stated, sniffing once more. Naruto glanced up at her a third time, though this time she had caught him staring at him in full force of the one thing that Naruto had wanted to avoid. Naruto shuddered for a moment, thinking of any way out of this. It's not thing Ayame-chan, don't worry about it. Naruto replied, Ayame continuing to stare at him with those horrible, cursed eyes that could make him spill anything. Ayame began to tear a bit, Naruto freezing. I just failed on my third time on try ying to pass, that's all. Naruto said as quickly as he could, Ayame looking up at him with a cute, yet saddened expression. Is that what's bothering you, Naruto-kun? Ayame asked, Naruto nodding a bit. There was a silence between the two, before Ayame gave her full attention to Naruto. Then stop mopping and go train, Ayame yelled, Naruto falling backwards off of his seat. Naruto grabbed onto the counter, pulling himself back up and looking at a pissed Ayame. Naruto stared at her in confusion. But it was no buts, go home and practice. Ayame order. Naruto starting to cower a bit. Ayame noticed this, and smiled a bit. Naruto, what do you want to accomplish? To be Hokage, Naruto stated, him cowering less at this point. Quote, do you think a Hokage would give up after one setback? Actually, Naruto has had many setbacks. Ayame knew this, since she was the one that usually helped him through it. Hey, if he was able to make it through that kinda hell, then this shouldn't be anything new. Back to the thing at hand, Naruto shook his head at the question. Exactly. So train, grow, and become what you dream. It's as simple as that. She wasn't one for dramatic speeches, go figure. Naruto started, wondering on what he had to do next. First, go learn some new jutsu, and if you learn a good amount. Ayame went nd the counter and hugged Naruto tightly. Naruto face beginning to flush at how close she was. I'll teach you one of my personal jutsu, Ayame whispered in his ear, letting him go from the hug. Alright, hell yeah, Naruto yelled, running off towards the nearest training field. He looked over his shoulder at her. See you later Ayame-chan, he shouted at her, waving a bit as he ran like his life depended on it. Ayame sighed and rubbed her temples. Enthusiastic, isn't he? Ayame heard someone say, looking up at the roof of the ramen shop. A girl around the age of 15 was sitting on the edge of the roof. An amused smile on her face. She was wearing a purple kimono with various flowers on it, most of them being a different color. She wore what looked like a hat with goggles on it. On her feet were a type of boots, ones with metal balls on the bottom to let her run fast than most people. Her pink hair reached down to her lower thigh, surprisingly splitting into two sections, like wings. Simka, mind keeping an eye on him? Ayame asked, a shadow flying over her a second later. She watched Simka follow Naruto, gliding in the air to catch up to him. Ayame watched them till they were out of sight. Before turning around and heading back to the other side of the counter, she needed to close this up soon since she would be going on a mission later today. Wondering about all the work she was going through to keep him strong. Is it all worth it? Naruto ran as fast like his life depended on it. Actually, it did. He needed to find an empty training field, practice a few jutsu, then go bother Ayame for one of hers. She was always promising to teach him one, but she never did. Maybe if he learned enough jutsu, she would be willing to share that earth jutsu that she had. It was so destructive, ripping the ground apart and taking out half of the training field when she last used it. Naruto hoped to learn it. Naruto's face brimmed at the thought of learning the jutsu, but it slowly lost that expression when he realized that he didn't have any scrolls that taught new jutsu. It's not like he could go to the library or anything, since they pretty much banned him from it. Maybe he shouldn't have caused over half the shelves to fall over through a series of simple traps and tricking leading the librarian through it all. What fun would that have been if he didn't though? But how am I going to learn some new jutsu? Naruto asked to himself, wondering on how he could possibly get a hold of a scroll or book. Maybe even get someone to teach him a thing or two. He could ask Haruka, but then again he had pissed him off earlier and it wouldn't be wise to go back. He could ask Oba-chan, but she was usually drunk around this time. Besides, she never really gave him any training. Possibly Neji, wait, never mind. He was usually in his all high and powerful mode at this point, so it would be best not to bother him. How the hell was he supposed to? Naruto flinched, as he heard a sound coming from a nearby alleyway. He looked over to see a cloud of dust coming up from a trash can. Naruto went over to it slowly, not knowing what he would find. Inching over a little bit. At a time before he was finally right next to it. Peeking inside, he saw something on top of all the garbage. It was a scroll, an old scroll. Even with all the dust on it, Naruto could tell that it was, or used to be, pure white. Slowly reaching down into the garbage can, he pulled the scroll out. Unwrapping it, Naruto looked at what was on the scroll. Naruto read down the scroll, his eyes growing wider and wider. His hands began to shake a bit, as he continued to read down the scroll. Smiling to himself, Naruto made his way towards the nearest field once more. He had just found something that could seriously help him accomplish his grow into being a true shinobi, something that could help him accomplish his dream. He had found something beyond imagination, and this, to him, could only get better. Whoever drooped this, he would have to thank at some point, if he ever meet them. Naruto decided that would be his second dream, to meet the person that either voluntarily or involuntary helped him with his first. Then again, we could give him 3 hours to forget about it. I mean, this is Uzumaki Naruto, people, the only ninja that seems to suffer from ADD. Up on a nearby building, Simka smiled to herself. He really seemed to love the scroll she dropped, and that was a good thing. It was a late birthday gift from his mother. She wasn't really his mother, but considering what she had done for him when he was young, she had given a little bit of herself to the child. Simka wondered why Amaterasu did that, but then again, she was trying to keep Tusky from going on another rampage. That's why they lessened the charges against her. Simka shook her head, wondering which jutsu the kid was going to learn from the scroll. There was quite a bit listed on there, so it should keep him entertained for some time. This seemed to spark her interest even more. Maybe, if the kid seemed interesting enough, she might just give him her summoning contract. Maybe. The door slowly opened, Naruto pushing it open with a happy Yet tired sigh. He was able to do it. He was able to learn 2 techniques from the scroll. It was difficult, his clothes being torn, his face covered in dirt. His chakra levels being worn down until he was in the red, but all worth it. He was able to learn techniques that would usually taken most 3 or more days to learn, all thanks to that scroll. Patting the side of his jacket, Naruto walked in and closed the door behind him, looking around when he heard someone's voice. "Rough night, huh?" asked a voice out of the blue. Naruto, wondering who it could be. Looking over at the source of the voice, Naruto shook his head when he found out who was speaking to him. "It's only you, Taro. I thought someone had snuck into the apartment again," Naruto stated, looking up at a lantern. The lantern itself was an old Japanese one, with a few extra features to it. For one thing, it had an eye and mouth, a tongue hanging down from it. Another being how much of a jackass it was at times. Said lantern only huffed, wiggling a bit. "That's all you freaking say, after how worried I was," the lantern yelled, wiggling a bit more. "Worried, were you? Yo, you were planning on trying to force Gogyu to leave," stated another voice, Naruto looking towards the source of it. Now walking towards him was a dog made out of stone, what looked like a statue of sorts. It had a little bit of armor around its neck, its ears curled into a spiral. The dog stopped in front of Naruto and sat down, looking him over. "You seem somewhat restless. I was doing some training today." "Don't worry about it, Zo," Naruto stated, glancing over at Taro. "Exactly why were you trying to get Gogyu-chan to leave?" "Well, she always tries to put my light out. I Didn't help but want her gone," Taro replied, looking towards the bathroom. Quote, "You'd think she'd get over the sinking thing by now." Naruto shrugged, moving towards his bed. He really didn't feel like putting up with this right now. All he cared about was getting some sleep, then bugging Ayame tomorrow to show him how to do that technique of hers. "I'll deal with you tomorrow, Taro. Right now, I need to get to bed," Naruto stated, heading towards the bed. Taro and Zo looked at each other, nodding to one another. Zo headed for the side of the bed, getting on his little pedestal and going to sleep. While Taro dimmed his light, Naruto just continued to head towards the bed, collapsing into it without a moment's hesitation. Reaching over to grab his blanket, he grabbed something else instead. "Hikari-chan, can you please change back into your other form? I don't think we can both sleep in the same bed," Naruto stated, turning over to face said person. Hikari just smiled, moving closer to Naruto, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I think it's just fine, Naruto-kun," Hikari stated, closing her eyes and laying her head on his chest. This feels good." Hikari's tail swayed a bit, while she tightened her grip on Naruto. Said person sighed, his hands reaching over to hers. "That's nice, Hikari," Naruto stated, entangling Hikari's arms from him. Hikari's expression turned into a blank one when Naruto untangled her from him, her expression changing once more when Naruto kicked her out of the bed. "What the hell, Naruto?" Hikari yelled, Naruto turning towards the side and covering himself with a blanket. "Do you have to be so loud?" Naruto asked, yawning a bit, before looking over his shoulder. "Well, I need to get some rest, good night, Hikari," Naruto stated, turning back over to the side. Hikari puffed out her cheeks, seeing that Naruto had already fallen asleep. A vein appearing on her head, she looked down at Naruto while planning on the various methods she could use to torture him for the next few days. Still glaring at him, her eyes softened a bit a moment later. He was sleeping so peacefully, which was rare nowadays. With all the stress that Naruto was going through, he barely was able to get a good night's sleep. Hikari smiled at Naruto's sleeping form, able to hear his light breathing. She wondered if she should really disturb him while he was like this. Then again he kicked her out of the bed. She sure as hell wasn't sleeping on the floor again, since she didn't give a fuck that she was a dog. Hikari was a woman, damn it, and should be treated as such. Grinning to herself, Hikari walked towards the bed. If Naruto was able to get a good night's sleep, she sure as hell would be able to. One way, or another. The third sighed, reading over another paper and signing it. Placing it in his done pile, the third looked at his to do, Pylon noted that it had indeed reached the ceiling of the room. Looking at the monstrous pile that was in front of him, the third did what any cage would have done. Wondering on how he could get this done faster, the third came up with an idea. Bringing his hands up to form a single seal, the third began to focus some chakra. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, the third stated, two clones appearing before him. Telling them to finish up what was left of the work, the Kage Bunshins glared at him, but nevertheless did it. The third went over towards the couch, laying down on it and taking a small break. This job was getting too tiresome for him. He would defiantly need to find a replacement soon, hopefully in the next 7 years or so. After that he could retire from this and spend some time with his family. Smiling at the thought of being able to take it easy in the near future, the third slowly closed his eyes, falling into some peaceful slumber. Hokage-sama, or not? Yes, what is it? The third asked with a tired sigh, looking over at the Junin that had come into the room. The Junin gave him a salute. Glancing over at the clones doing the third's work, the third clearing his throat got the shinobi's attention again, him looking back over at Hokage. The third wondering what the hell could be so important as to disrupt him at this hour of the night. Sir, we've managed to finally find it, the Junin stated, the two clones stopping what they were doing and the original staring at the nin with wide eyes. You've finally found? Yes sir, in fact I have it with me, the nin stated, reaching into an oversized pouch and pulling something out. The third looked at the package with a gaping mouth, grabbing it from the nin and ripping it open, stopping when he saw what it was. Slowly, a tear crawled down his face at the sight of the object, only one thing barely going through his mind. With this, we can. The evening light shined down on Konoha, people going about their business. Shouts could be heard from merchants, laughing from people in the streets. The Ri village was full of sounds that of an average life in it. Of course, to some people this was soothing, while others just ignored it. Those people tended to be the heavier sleepers, since the noise carried on throughout the night. Ayame wished that Naruto wasn't one of those people, she really did, then getting his ass up in the morning wouldn't be so much of a hassle. Thus the reasons why LL mornings seemed to suck for her nowadays. So, why are we here again? Ayame heard someone ask, looking over at HT person. A boy around 5 feet 6 feet tall stood next to her, his white eyes scanning the entire area. He wore a simple white jacket, black shorts and sandals along with it. He had bandages all up his right arm and leg, his village 4 head protector around his head. The boy put his hand through his hair, snapping his neck and looking over at Ayame. You know that Naruto-san is not going to get up at this time of hour, he stated, looking back over at said person's apartment door. We should come back in around 3, maybe 4 more hours. Neji, the Hokage wants to see Naruto-kun by the end of the day. So if he's going to learn that technique, he's going to get up now, Ayame stated, walking up to the door, knocking on it. Naruto-kun, wake up, the Hokage wants to see you. As Ayame made her futile attempts to get Naruto to answer the door, Neji scanning over her. It was rare to see her in her Junin outfit, even if he saw her on an almost daily basis. Her hair pulled up into a bun and the uniform showing her figure quite well. Neji shrugged off the thoughts he was starting to have, realizing that he had been scanning over every inch and curve of Ayame's body. Speaking of her, she was still knocking on the door. Naruto-kun, get up already, Ayame stated, kicking the door. Neji watching her and sweat dropping. This was Naruto's best friend, he almost felt bad for him. Ayame continued to kick the door for several more minutes, before the doorknob finally started to turn. The door opening, Neji and Ayame looked down at the thing who opened it. Ayame-sama, Neji-sama, what are you doing here? Zo asked, looking at the two. Ayame smiled, bending down and petting the stone dog on his head. We just came to get Naruto-kun. Zo-kun, the Hokage wants to see him, Ayame stated, standing straight up and moving into the house, Neji nodding at the dog and going in as well. The dog waited for them to both enter, closing the door and walking into the room. Ayame headed straight for the bed, knowing that Naruto, of all people, would have slept through all that noise. His ninja skills sucked in that area, but hey, it allowed her to get a glimpse of him sleeping every once in a while. God, did she think he was cute while he slept? Walking over towards the bed, Ayame reached for the sheets and grabbed them, pulling them off of the bed. She smiled, looking down at Naruto, only for that expression to change swiftly into one of anger, Neji and Zou feeling Ayame's killing intent. Before them was Naruto, sleeping peacefully on his bed, lightly breathing and his entire body relaxed. This is not what pissed Ayame off. What did was the female sleeping in the same bed with him. She was taller than Naruto, that much Ayame knew, probably around 5 feet 8. The female was holding on tightly to Naruto, her arms around his neck. Her face was lightly rubbing against his, her white hair moving slightly. Her legs wrapped around Naruto's, intertwining them and bringing her body closer to his. Her chest being pressed against his back, what looked like a nice D cup at that, compared to Ayame's C cup. This also helped the killer intent rise to new levels, causing Neji and Zou to cower, as Ayame's killer intent raised even more. Naruto, so why did we spend all that time training? Naruto asked, looking over Ayame. Don't get him wrong, he didn't mind learning a new technique, even if it wasn't Ayame's signature one. After that little awkward moment earlier and a lot of explaining from Naruto that Hikari was just a dog spirit, Ayame managed to cool down a bit and remember why she was there to begin with. She told him about how the Hokage wanted to see him, but not why. While he was getting ready to leave, Ayame told him that he was going to be doing something beforehand. Naruto was going to complain about it, but when he heard that it was a new jutsu, that changed everything. Why Naruto-kun, this is the first time you've ever needed a reason to learn a new jutsu. Ayame stated, Naruto only sighing and placing his hands behind his head. Well, you said we needed to go to see the old man, but we spent the entire day just training. Neji even had to return to his mansion because we took so long. Naruto stated, thinking about it. Neji, in all terms, needed to lighten up a bit. Seriously, Naruto understood how he felt about the main Hyuga family, but still, he needed to move on from that damn hatred. I mean, if Naruto had all the people that tried to beat him, kill him, steal from him, and yes, even him, then he would be hating almost all of Konoha. Stop complaining Naruto, we're almost there anyway. Ayame replied, as both her and Naruto continued on their way towards the tower. When they got there, Naruto walked ahead of Ayame, opening the door for her to walk through. Though when Ayame walked inside, a very warm smile at Naruto first people took advantage of the door being held open, the ones originally heading for it walking at a faster pace, going through the door as well. It became a nice 10-minute wait for Ayame, who almost feeling bad for Naruto getting stuck in that little crowd. Once Naruto was free from holding the door open, they made their way up past the desks in the front and up the staircase. The really long staircase itself was a bitch to climb, Ayame and Naruto breathing hard when they got to the top. Whoever went up those stairs, no matter who they were, always seemed to be out of breath. Though Ayame had only lost her breath slightly, Naruto needed to rest for a moment. After the very short rest due to Ayame wanting to get to the Hokage's room as quickly as possible, they made their way down the walkway towards the room. Standing in front of the door, both Ayame and Naruto sighed in relief at the sight of it. Ayame walked up to the door, raising her hand to it. Knocking a few times, she asked if anyone was inside. Hearing someone call them for them to enter, Naruto opened the door once again, both heading inside. It was cluttered to say the least. The entire room was full of various papers, documents, packages. Almost the entire floor was covered in them. Looking up from the mess, Naruto looked straight at the third. Naruto, it's good to see you again. The third said, smiling a bit, it's been quite some time since I have. Yeah, I know. So, can you tell me why you called me here? Naruto asked, Ayame watching both of them quietly. These two were close, almost grandfather-grandson-like. So not having the chance talk to each other for around 6 months was kinda awkward. The third got up from his seat, moving around his desk and towards Naruto. He stopped when he was about 5 feet from Naruto, smiling sadly. Naruto, I need to show you something. The third stated, walking past both Ayame and Naruto, heading for the door. Turning the knob, he opened it wide for them. Naruto, there's something I need to tell you, something we've been keeping from you for a long time. The Sandaime watched Naruto look at him in a confused manner. While Ayame froze on the spot, she looked at the Sandaime with an expression that practically pleaded the third not to tell him. The third shook his head at Ayame, turning around and heading out the door. Naruto followed, asking the third as many questions as he could, wanting to know what it is. Ayame, whose hopes were now crushed, just followed them quietly. She knew that Naruto couldn't be kept in the dark forever, just not now, not at this moment. Heading through the Hokage Tower, they went down the stairs and through first floor, out the main doors. Following the Sandaime, they made their way behind the Hokage Tower and towards the cliffs that were behind it. Leading them right up to the cliff's side, the Sandaime looked for something, placing his hands on the wall a second later. What looked like a seal appeared, the Sandaime turning around to face Naruto and Ayame as the side of the cliff started to open up. Naruto, do you know the reason why everyone hates you? The Sandaime asked, Naruto being taken back a bit at the question. Was all that Naruto could say, never really giving it any thought up till now. He just learned to accept the hatred. No, he didn't give up. He just learned that there were a lot of assholes in the village. The Sandaime shook his head, entering the now open cavern, signaling for the two to follow. It was a long walk down the stairs that was inside of the cavern, Naruto wondering if they were ever going to reach it. He wondered why Ayame was being so right, then again she could be on her period and just having a mood swing. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, Naruto was greeted to a strange sight. They were now standing in a large red room, light pink fires lighting it up. In the middle of the room was a large seal, one that covered up at least half of the space. This wasn't really all that special, compared to the fact that it seemed like every Junin in Konoha seemed to be in the cavern. Seriously, there had to be a couple hundred Junins just standing in that cavern, the cavern's the size of 2 football fields. Naruto, there's something we need to tell you, the Sandaime said, turning around to face Naruto. Do you remember the stories about the Kyuubi? He asked, Naruto nodding his head. Yeah, I remember it, but what does that have to do with this? Naruto asked, looking over at Ayame. Do you know anything, Ayame-chan? Ayame just stood there, her body frozen at the thought. Sandaime shook his head, walking up towards Naruto. And crouching to his height, I'm mad. The Sandaime tall in this one, because he deserves to be at least 6 foot. Naruto-kun, everything you've been told about it is false, we were unable to kill the beast so we sealed it away to keep it from harming people, the Sandaime stated, Naruto raising an eyebrow at him. But what does that have to do with? Naruto paused for a moment, his eyes slowly widening as he figured it out. No, I can't be. Naruto, I know this is hard for you, but it's true. You are the Jinchuriki that holds the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto, shocked from all of this, dropped to his knees, his mind wondering with thoughts of everything that's happened up to this point. At that very second, all made sense. He was the carrier of a demon, one of which could kill thousands in a single strike. One that had killed thousands in a single strike. The Sandaime, frowning through all of this, formed a small smile on his face. There is, however, a way to remove the demon without killing you, Naruto. The Sandaime stated, Naruto's head snapping towards him. How? With this, the Sandaime stated, reaching into his robe and pulling out something. It was a mask, from what Naruto could tell, though the fact that it had no markings on it made it hard to believe. The mask was pure white, 2 eye holes about the only thing that was on it. The Sandaime gave the mask to Naruto, who slowly took it, his hands shaking. Before you are removed of the Kitsune, there's something I would like to ask you, Naruto. After the attack from the Kyuubi, people became very emotional at what happened. Watching their friends, family, loved ones die. At this very moment, there are people who still live in their sorrows due to its attack on the village. So I ask you, Naruto, will you be willing to take the blame for everything? Be willing to become a scapegoat for those that are suffering within this village and to help them move on through their lives even if just a bit? The third asked, Naruto talk. In everything that he was being told, his head once more falling once more. Slowly, Naruto lifted his head to face the Sandaime, his face formed into a grin. Sure, I'll help everyone, believe it. The third smiled, standing straight up once more. Thank you Naruto. The Sandaime looked towards the large group of nin and the seal in the middle of the room. Now, Naruto, to remove them Kyab. I from you go towards the center of the seal, then place the mask on your face. Wait, that's it, the Sandaime stated, Naruto looking at him in a confused manner. Looking at the seal and sighing, Naruto walked past the Sandaime and towards the seal. Taking a step on the seal lit up in a bright light, blinding Naruto for a second before returning to normal. Naruto hesitated for a moment, before walking towards the center again. Reaching the center, he turned towards the Sandaime, glancing down towards the mask. Raising it up to his face, Naruto put the mask on. The third looked towards the other nin in the room. Begin it now. The nin moved as fast as they could, surrounding the seal that Naruto was in. Bringing their hands into a seal, they began to chant the same few words over and over again. An aura appeared around their bodies, Psi aura slowly moving away from their bodies and moving towards Naruto. As the auras touched him, Naruto's back arched. The intense power from the auras making him feel like he was being ripped apart. He began to hover in the air, the auras circling around his body. The aura began to flash brightly, blinding anyone in the room. The light spreading to engulf the entire room, Naruto's piercing scream being heard from everyone in the room. Ayame, who was covering her eyes to block out the light, could only see. Reem Naruto's name before the intense light pushed her back into the wall, letting out another scream before her world faded to darkness. I still can't believe he made Hokage, a man stated, turning to face the person he was talking to. This person was old, around 70 plus at least. At one point in time, he was considered to be one of the best shinobis in all of Konoha, now retired from active duty. The person that the man was talking to was wearing a plain black hoodie and pants, both of which were baggy. The person said that it was comfortable for him, considering that his old Hinobi uniform was just as tight for him. Well, he did work hard through the years to get this far. The old man said, smiling to himself. I think everyone was shocked when they learned who it was. You piratically gave everyone a heart attack. The man from before stated, sighing a bit as he thought about it. But you really have to imagine the shock on everyone's face when they discovered that him of all people had become the 5th Hokage. You sure you didn't make him your successor just to see everyone's faces? Nonsense. I would never put the village in danger for such a joke. Right, do you remember the little incident with Tsunade? The man asked, the old man letting his head drop at the mentioning of what had happened a few months ago. You just had to bring that up, didn't you Kakashi? Yo, Sarutobi-sama, Kakashi-sensei. Both said people looked towards the source of the voice, taking in his new wardrobe. The man before them had grown, but not by much. He was only standing at 5 feet 9. His spiky orange hair making him look 5 feet 10. He was wearing a simple black shirt, his Junin vest on top of it. Wearing black, waterproof pants and black boots along with it, this making his hair and blue eyes stand out quite a bit. The man also had 3 nin pouches on him, lining behind his belt. He was always ready to kill someone nowadays. What are you guys doing? The man asked, watching both Sarutobi and Kakashi slowly hide their books behind their back. Sarutobi coughed, looking up at the man with a please don't tell our wives look. We were just talking about the new Hokage, Naruto. Sarutobi stated, Naruto thinking about what the third had just said, before laughing his ass off. He was apparently thinking about the new Hokage, and how much of a poor bastard he was. Sneezing, the 5th wiped his nose off. It had been a long day for him, and it was only 8 o'clock in the morning. Marriage, you had to hate and love it. Love because it means, most of the time, that you've found someone you can truly care for, to live the rest of your days out with. Hate it, because your wife gets you up at 5 o'clock in the morning and sends you to work. Sighing, he mentally stated, what a bitch, before looking over at his piles upon piles of paperwork. God, this job is too troublesome. So when do you think he's going to stop laughing? Sarutobi asked, watching Naruto continue to laugh his ass off on the ground, while Kakashi shrugged. I really don't know, but at least we can take advantage of the situation. How is poking him with a stick taking advantage? The third asked, watching Kakashi poke Naruto continuously with a stick. Were he was able to find the stick, Sarutobi would never know. The third looked back over at Naruto, who was still laughing. Probably happy that he turned down the job after all. Naruto, don't you have to be at the academy in a few minutes? He asked, Naruto's eyes shooting wide open. Holy shit, nah. Naruto was soon off the floor and running as fast as he could towards the academy, Kakashi and Sarutobi watching him run off in a cloud of dust. That was interesting, Kakashi stated, looking over at Sarutobi. Think this has anything to do with his kid making Chunin? Sarutobi looked over at Kakashi with a raised eyebrow. You know she never went through the academy. Naruto didn't seem to want to give her up at that point. It's probably the day where people from all the ranks show up. He probably got her to be the Chunin to take questions. Sarutobi said, Kakashi slowly nodding to everything he said. His one eye flashing open a second later. Holy shit, running as fast as he could, Kakashi ran towards the academy, a dust cloud trailing behind him. The Sandame slapped his face, pulling his hand down at the thought of what those two idiots were going to do. Though Sherry should keep them in order. Maybe it was a good thing that Naruto's kid was chosen for the Chunin after all. Now, it's time for the questions, so sit down and shut the fuck up. Naruto yelled, the academy students running as fast as they could to get into their proper seats. In less than 2 minutes, the room had grown silent and the children were in their seats. Kakashi clapped at this, seeing as how Naruto could order his students around so easily. Then again, if he wanted to, he could do the same. Naruto let out a tired sigh, coughing a bit. Okay, now, any questions? Naruto saw one of the children raise their hands. Yes, why is she up there? The boy asked, Naruto looking in the direction that the child pointed. There standing was a small, 7-year-old girl, holding what looked like a stuffed sheep. She was pretty big for her age, around 3 feet 1 in height, her pinkish hair coming down to her shoulder blades. She was wearing a simple pink hoodie and black shorts loose along with sandals. She had 3 belts around her waist, all full to the brim with kunai, wires, scrolls etc. A dull expression dawned the child's face, the whisker marks on her cheek barely moving due to how little movement there was. Naruto sighed, looking back at the child. Sherry is the Chunin for today. If you have any questions on Chunins are what they need to do, ask her, since Kakashi-sensei will just point you in her direction anyway. Naruto stated, looking over at said person to see that he had pulled out his perverted book. Naruto took out a kunai, aiming to hit the book. To his surprise, well not really, another kunai flew in the air and hit the book, impelling it to the wall. A second later, the book burst into flames, Kakashi looking at the sight with watery eyes. No, Kakashi yelled, dropping to his knees. That was limited edition, complete with the authors and the actors from the movie's signature. Kakashi then began to cry to himself, bringing his hands up to cover his watery eyes. Sherry just blew a piece of her hair out of her eyes, looking down at Kakashi with a dull expression. If you didn't want to lose it, then you shouldn't have been reading it in front of me, Uncle Kakashi. Sherry stated, having little remorse for what she did. Looking back over at them, Naruto saw that Kakashi was still crying over his book, and probably would continue to cry for the next few days. Naruto then looked over at Sherry, smiling a bit at what he saw. The children, all around the age of 9 and 10, had surrounded her, asking as many questions as they could think up. He got a good laugh out of her clueless expression and out of the fact that she didn't know what to do. Wondering on whether or not to save his daughter from the embarrassment that she was going through right now, Naruto chose on the later and walked towards the group. There was hope for her yet, maybe. Well, that was interesting, Naruto stated, thinking back at what had happened just a few hours ago. Sherry looked at him with her usual dull expression, not really interested. Though, I can't believe they're thinking about that sort of thing at that age. Sherry froze, Naruto walking a little ahead of her. You just had to bring that up, didn't you? Sherry asked, Naruto smiling even more. What? You should have been flattered. A 9-year-old grabbed my ass, how do you think I felt? Sherry asked, Naruto taking a thoughtful position. Giving it a moment of thought, Naruto turned his attention back to Sherry. Well, I thought you were into older men, Naruto stated, Sherry glaring at him. I am into older men, not little boys, Sherry stated, walking a little faster towards the ramen stand than Naruto. Naruto figured that she would grow out of it eventually. I mean, come on, it's not like she would actually be able to date till she's like 12, so she had some time to think it over. And Naruto some time to corrupt her small, not so fragile mind into his own liking. At some points, Naruto loved having a child. Walking faster to keep up with his daughter, Naruto headed towards the ramen stand. Picking out a random stool that was not currently being used by someone else, Naruto jumped on it, spinning around while saying, "We." Sherry, on the other hand, ignored him and sat on the stool next to him. Waiting for some service. Naruto-kun, how long do you plan on doing that? Until I get some ramen, Ayame-chan, until I get some ramen. Naruto stated, continuing to spin on his chair. Ayame. The ramen waitress shrugged, being used to this kind of behavior by Naruto already, and looked over at Sherry, who was currently plotting her father's slow and very painful death. The usual Sherry-chan, Ayame asked, Sherry answering with a simple nod. Ayame took one more glance at Naruto, before working on the ramen. 10 minutes later of Naruto spinning on his chair non-stop and Sherry wondering the same question. Why her? Over and over again in her mind. Ayame finished the ramen and handed it to them, or at least tried. Naruto, dizzy from the constant spinning, fell off the stool as soon as he stopped, hitting the ground with a large thud, saying, "Ouch," lightly. That's what you get for acting like a dumbass, Sherry stated, eating her ramen. Naruto, getting over a little of the dizziness, climbed back onto the stool, his head shaking a bit. You don't have to a bitch about it, Sherry-chan. Meh, life's a bitch, Sherry replied, continuing to eat her ramen. Naruto shrugged, reaching over towards the ramen. Was until Ayame smacked his hand. No spinning while eating the ramen, got it? Ayame stated, Naruto nodding his head. He then reached for the ramen again, smiling. When no one tried to get in the way of him getting to eat again. He then began to eat ramen at an extremely fast rate, finishing it in less than a minute and turning towards his daughter. You done yet? Naruto asked, Sherry glancing over at him. No, and don't rush a lady, Sherry replied, slurping up the last of the ramen. She hopped off the stool, grabbing her stuffed turtle and looked over towards Ayame. Thank you for the ramen, Ayame-chan, Sherry said, bowing a bit. Anytime, Sherry-chan, anytime, Ayame stated, looking over at Naruto, who was currently reaching into his pocket and pulling out his frog wallet. Pulling out the right amount of money, Naruto paid for the ramen and looked at Sherry with a smile on his face. Shall we go now? Naruto asked, about to head in the direction of the house. That was until he saw a shadow pass by the ground for a second, looking up to see a bird had flown towards him. Extending his arm outwards, the bird landed on it and folded its wings. Naruto's free hand them over towards the bird's leg, grabbing the piece of paper that was on it and opening it with his thumb. More work tonight? Sherry asked, Naruto nodding his head on confirmation. Sherry, for one split second, let a small frown appear on her face, before returning to the normal dull expression. Naruto himself wondered if he was ever going to get a break from his work. Maybe he should ask for a vacation from the Hokage. Then again, Hokage would probably have to fill out paperwork to let him have one. Time for another wonderful day of countless slaughtering and hunting of rejected nin. Just when I got my clothes dry clean too. You sure you're going to be fine? Naruto asked, straightening the armor on his left arm. He was wearing an outfit to his own design, unlike the usual hunter nin uniform. First off, he was once again wearing a pair of baggy black pants and shirt, only without the vest. Underneath the shirt he was wearing chainmail, it a lit TLE bigger than the shirt it was underneath. He was also wearing leg guards underneath his baggy pants, not even noticeable unless you lifted the pants up a bit. He had kept his several belts, a long W ith the addition of a dark blue jacket to add extra spaces for him to store scrolls and other things. His arms also had guards on them, the left one coming all the way up Naruto's arm. In his left hand was a Hunter Nin's mask. Yes, I'll be fine, Sherry replied, as she watched her father straighten out the armor on his right armor. She looked down at her stuffed sheep, playing a little bit with one of its legs. Naruto smiled sadly, placing the mask on his face. Alright, I'll be going then, Naruto stated, walking out of his room and out into the living room. Looking around the room, he turned his attention over towards the cat laying on the couch. Look after her, okay? Naruto asked, the cat meowing and just going back to sleep. Naruto was just about to leave when he heard something walk up to him. I'll be fine, Zo, Naruto stated, turning over towards the stone dog. Said person only frowned at its master. You really should give up this job, Zo stated, looking towards the other room. What would happen if? That would never happen, Naruto stated, beginning to form some seals. After all, I'd never leave her alone in the world like that. Naruto then finished the seals, starting to glow after a second had gone by. Still, be careful, Naruto. Naruto sent Zo a grin, flashing from existence a second later. Staring at the spot that his master had been standing at for a few seconds, he then made his way towards the room that Naruto's daughter was currently in. Maybe if Zo was fast enough, he could brainwash his daughter into being a little more careful with things. Though, considering her mother, this may take a while. Appearing in a flash of light, Naruto arrived at the Hokage's office, bowing his head in respect to the cage. Even if he could kick his ass, Naruto still needed to show respect, one way or another. It's not like the guy was the first choice on the list, anyway. Hello, Hokage-sama, you said it was an emergency. Naruto looked up to see the Hokage, only to find the Hokage's wife sitting in his chair. Tenten-chan, what are you doing here? The Hokage already went home, and asked me to give you your mission for him. Tenten replied, gritting her teeth. Yep, he defiantly didn't want to be Shikamaru right now. He almost felt bad for the new Hokage, well actually, he really didn't do anything. Then going home to Tenten, who seemed to have anger management issues when you pissed her off. Almost like Ino, really, they both got along great with one another. So here it is, try to finish it as soon as possible, Tenten stated, while Naruto opened the scroll and had a look at it, his eyes widening with every word he read. That's impossible. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.